Every so often, a game comes along that carries the weight of expectations, and this year has several examples of such titles. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Shadow of the Erdtree, maybe Astrobot, Stellar Blade, and Metaphor ReFantazio. These titles were poised to refine their genres or maybe to spark a movement, and if executed flawlessly, become one of the best games to be mentioned in years to come. Metaphor ReFantazio arrived on the scene bearing this burden, due to Atlus's rich history and a legacy of beloved series like Persona and Shin Megami Tensei. This video will not be about talking Metaphor's aspects and trying to make it look like the game of the year. Well, unfortunately no. I believe Final Fantasy VII Rebirth deserves to be the game of the year, and Metaphor ReFantazio sadly fails to meet that goal. While Metaphor is undeniably breathtaking, has memorable characters, intriguing narrative and catchy soundtracks, it misses its chance at perfection in ways that leave the heart aching. And today, I would like to focus on those points. I'm Arcadenaut here, and today we'll talk about Metaphor ReFantazio's... No, this won't be a critique. It's my lament for one of the best games of 2024 that could have been the best game of 2024. Metaphor ReFantazio could have been Atlus's magnum opus. It had the potential to surpass the art and the level design of Persona 5 Royal by all means. And this will be the focus of this video. Before delving deeper into what could have been made better aspects of this video, I need to say that I am 100% sure there will be an upgraded, refined and polished version of Metaphor ReFantazio. I am definitely sure there will be something like Persona 4 Golden or Persona 5 Royal, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance kind of treatment. Because let's face it, Metaphor ReFantazio feels like there are some cut contents here and there, in terms of level design and even in some points in the narrative. Metaphor ReFantazio achieves so much as a new IP and even handles itself quite well among Atlus's bigger and older IPs. However, it falters in the most heartbreaking ways, failing to capitalize on ideas that could have elevated to perfection. Maybe these issues happened due to budget issues or strict development time. Still, I'm sure Metaphor ReFantazio will be refined into something greater, perhaps even address some of the problems that I will be talking about today. Metaphor set out to deliver an unparalleled RPG experience. It promises a new fantasy world, totally unknown, and seemed to be influenced by the steampunk genre with Atlus's design style that is blended with innovative mechanics and a narrative that would tackle societal issues head-on. When Metaphor ReFantazio shines, it shines as few games can. The concepts of a united nation using Esperanto as the language used in the soundtracks are some of the game design brilliances that few games can. It is a triumph of imagination, a gloomy fantasy world that you wish you would created before, that blends high fantasy with societal issues, with characters that represent different sides of daily life issues from different classes. From its layered architecture to its vibrant cultures, the world feels alive. Metaphor ReFantazio leaves you intrigued about what will happen to this gloomy world and pins you on your chair while characters like Louis make their appearance, shaping the narrative. But it's in these very foundations where the cracks begin to show. And I'm not gonna come up with saying, oh, there are some several towns in the world that appears as menus when we make purchases and stuff. No. One of my biggest issues with Metaphor ReFantazio is the lack of the level design that fails to deliver this fantasy world. Despite Metaphor ReFantazio having a grandeur full of mystery points in its world map, or even had the potential to deliver dungeons that could have been unique to its art design, the overall delivery was bland and repetitive. And given that Metaphor ReFantazio is full of side quests and side dungeons that require you to grind for experience, maybe for gold and archetype levels, these mediocre level designs left a bad aftertaste in my mouth. These levels were tailored in a sense as if Atlus never had any experience with JRPGs before. Outside of the core hubs, there was a huge lack of engagement with the fantasy world we lived in, and this missed opportunity is what makes me sad and gives me a reason to grieve. In Metaphor ReFantazio, there is a brilliant, stunning world out there, a world carrying the remnants of wars, a world hiding the corruption that is unfortunately left unexplored. Gloomy old battlefields filled with skulls that we only visit in a cutscene, lands of glass that we only see as stunningly drawn concept arts. All these areas, albeit handled through conversations between the characters, they are all left unexplored, unable to delve further in. Each new location teases players with the promise of fresh quests, hidden lore that would help us to learn more about the world setting. These areas are all begged me to explore further. These areas could have been presented in a side quest or maybe as a bounty with its own level designed to offer something memorable, maybe challenging even. And this lack of rich level design can be even felt in main story dungeons. Although the cathedral map of the royal capital Grandtrad felt grandiose, layered and open for exploration, which seemed quite similar to the level design of Persona 5, I can't say the same for the rest of the main story dungeons. Possibly until the very last story dungeon. Don't worry, I will delve further about the Magic Academy that insanely feels like a cut content that could have revealed so much about this world and the dynamics of this world setting. Martira, the old castle town's dungeon, felt like a tiny part of something bigger and even more sinister, and the worst thing is, these level designs felt similar with each other. They left me without any sense of accomplishment in regard of exploration, or without any sense of joy that I felt in previous Atlus's titles. And this feeling reached to its worst point, especially in Dragon Temple Dungeon, where the narrative reaches to a point where we get to see something quite similar also in Shin Megami Tensei 4, or as an Etienne Odyssey reference, where the characters of Shin Megami Tensei 4 discover that their hometown, or rather their homeworld Eastern Kingdom of Mikado, is connected to the real world Tokyo, albeit a ruined city of Tokyo that is ravaged by the demons. And in Metaphor ReFantazio, when you reach the depths of the Mustari village's Dragon Temple and realize the game's fantastical setting is literally built atop the ruins of Tokyo, it should land as a revelation that shakes both the player and the characters to their core. After all, this twist radically reframes the narrative, just like it happened in Shin Megami Tensei 4, right? What seemed like a high fantasy epic suddenly reveals itself as a tale of humanity's cyclical history, where advanced civilization falls into ruin only to give way to myth and legend. Yet, Metaphor doesn't treat this moment with the importance it deserves. It was maybe a little more than mild curiosity. Compare this to Shin Megami Tensei 4, where a similar twist, the reveal of Tokyo beneath the medieval kingdom of Mikado, is delivered with cinematic weight, the music swells, the camera lingers on the desolate ruins, and this scene becomes a turning point for the narrative. Maybe this reveal might be delved further in the new Metaphor ReFantazio in the future, but this lack of engagement left me with a huge disappointment. And given that I was already dissatisfied with the overall level design of the main story dungeons, this was indeed a huge missed potential. Literally, and I mean literally, Metaphor ReFantazio's world is begging to be discovered, begging to be delved deeper, begging to be further developed. Another issue that I had with Metaphor ReFantazio is its adaptation of the calendar system, a beloved mechanic from the Persona series that goes well with that concept. However, somewhat limits the true potential of Metaphor ReFantazio after reaching halfway into the game or around the late game, where this calendar system or the daily management just limits the players and even the narrative. On paper, it's a genius move. Structuring the game around the Royal Tournament creates a palpable sense of urgency, where every day feels like a precious resource as you choose between building bonds, completing quests, or preparing for the next challenge. It adds layers of strategy and immerses players in the stakes of protagonist's journey, yet, for all its brilliance, the linearity of the main story and the lack of true branching paths, where you feel like the narrative starts to feel a bit rushed after you complete the Dragon Temple sections. Around this time, you get to reveal your true colors to Louis, and ReFantazio takes its true shape, facing the protagonist against Louis to fight for the throne. And at that point of ReFantazio, the calendar loses its purpose and turns into an obstacle for the narrative, rather than a supporting pillar for the progression. This system being an obstacle becomes clearer as we reach the ruins of the Mage Academy, and then learned of another deadline date for the narrative to continue. Although this Mage Academy is mentioned multiple times throughout the game, its significance to the lore and certain characters, particularly Juna, is never fully realized. Possibly it was created as either a hub or a major dungeon then, but its potential never realized due to the game direction. Juna, a key member of the party, studied at the Mage Academy before becoming a songstress. Her connection to the Institute is integral to her character arc, yet the game never allows players to explore this connection in meaningful ways. Her decision to leave the party at the end of the game to help the Restore Academy feels unearned, as the Academy itself is barely developed as a location or concept. Players are told of its importance, but they are never shown, just like the ruins of Tokyo we have seen in the Dragon Temple. And the main reason that I think there is an issue with the pace after the Dragon Temple is the events of importance, plot twists happening right after another in Alterbury. Namely the fight against Louis, Forden's death, Basilios' awakening with Fidelio's death, and the fight against Saint Rella that takes place before the ruins of the Mage Academy. This rapid succession of events leaves little room for meaningful gameplay or narrative reflection. Especially when ReFantazio had a slower yet impactful pace until the Dragon Temple. The result is an overwhelming series of cutscenes that feel more like a checklist of plot points than a cohesive story. The Academy could have been the stage for Rella's reveal, with the party uncovering her manipulations and confronting her as the dungeon's boss, and at this moment, with all these events, ReFantazio could have abandoned the calendar system and maybe turned into more of an open-world JRPG like Shin Megami Tensei series, blending both of these mechanics from two different IPs. Atlus's games often follow a meta-narrative structure that reflects their themes and gameplay mechanics. In Persona 5, the main story dungeons involve infiltrating a morally compromised figure of authority. Similarly, Shin Megami Tensei games frequently pit players against the extremes of order and chaos, forcing them to navigate the moral complexities of both paths, either supporting one or going neutral to free the humanity from the either side's rule. And this meta-narrative structure reflecting the game's theme or narrative is what ReFantazio also lacks. The Mage Academy could have served as Metaphor's meta-narrative counterpart, reflecting these themes through its conflict with Rella and the Church, or a section in Dragon Temple showcasing the past civilization's destruction and why ReFantazio's world needs unity above all. Or maybe a meta-narrative dungeon showcasing more about Louis, rather than him explaining his motive or his origin in cutscenes. Unfortunately, ReFantazio lost so many opportunities to fully realize its thematic potential, especially at its core. Louis is a reflection of one of Metaphor's central themes, the battle between order and chaos. As a would-be ruler, he embodies the chaotic extreme, rejecting the oppressive structures of this world society in favor of radical vision for a new world. His disdain for the status quo drives him to the brink of nihilism, advocating for a form of natural selection that borders on genocide. It is a philosophical reminiscent of antagonists like Albert Wesker from Resident Evil series, whose vision of a better humanity is similarly twisted and destructive, yet Louis is not chaos for chaos's sake. Unlike more shallow villains, His motivations are rooted in a genuine desire to dismantle a system he sees as irreparably corrupt. He's a product of the discrimination and inequality that permeates the world of Metaphor ReFantazio. And his actions, while extreme, stem from a place of profound disillusionment. And of course, one of the most intriguing aspects of Louis is his relationship with the protagonist. He serves not only as an antagonist but also as a mirror to the player's character. Both are outsiders in a deeply flawed society driven by a desire to enact change, where the protagonist seeks to build bridges and inspire hope. Louis chooses to burn everything to the ground to create something completely new. And I believe this dynamic will be further developed in the new Metaphor ReFantazio. I know there is nothing announced by Atlus' side about this new version, but I'm sure the cut content or the missed opportunities due to the development time or the budget is obviously clear. While there are moments of ideological conflict between these two characters, these are often overshadowed by the broader political machinations of the plot. A deeper exploration of their shared pain and divergent paths could have added emotional weight to their eventual confrontation, elevating it from a climactic battle to also a philosophical reckoning. Every so often, a game emerges with the potential to redefine its genre to stand as a masterpiece. Metaphor ReFantazio is one of those games, a work brimming with ambition, imagination, and the unmistakable touch of Atlus's creative brilliance. Yet, as we journeyed through its world, met its characters, we were also met with a deep, persistent ache. This ache wasn't born from dissatisfaction, but from the knowledge of what could have been. It also invites us into a world filled with tantalizing hints of stories untold, cities left unexplored, characters with unresolved arcs, and dungeons that fail to live up to their narrative promise. Metaphor ReFantazio could have been Atlus's magnum opus, a title that transcended even the celebrated heights of Persona 5 Royal or Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. But the cracks in its foundation are undeniable. From its underwhelming level design to its mishandled pacing in the latter half, the game falters in delivering the cohesive experience it desperately aspires to be. The missed opportunities, whether they stem from budget constraints, cut contents, or a rushed development timeline, leave us grieving for what this game could have achieved. And yet, this is not a tale of a failure. Metaphor ReFantazio is still a breathtaking achievement, a bold first step into a new world that holds immense promise. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. If there is also any other Game of the Year contenders that you wish me to dig further, be sure to share them by the comments below. Any support through YouTube, Join or Patreon is really appreciated, and I will see you soon in my next video.